Yo, guys, what's up? Russ here with episode 6 of Let's Talk Comics. This week's guest, the Bearded Comic Bros in the house.
What's up,
How you
Russ?
doing, Bearded?
Man, I'm doing good. I feel like we are in so many chats together and things like that we've been on some live streams, but haven't been on a lot of live streams to just talk you and I. So this is good, man.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
excited.
it's probably the first time, like one-on-one.
Yeah, definitely. So this is good. We don't need any outside voices. It's just us getting to talk
Yeah,
comics. So
no doubt. So I always like to open these with like this question, like what specifically got you into collecting?
yeah, so for me it was twofold. So it was my mom and my grandma that kind of got me into collecting. Uh how it started for me was as a kid, I apparently my mom says my first word ever was Batman. Whether that's true or not, I who am I to say? I was around, but I don't remember, right? But she swears Batman was my first word. Um, but I didn't really get into comics until probably about six till I was like 6 or 7. So I'm the youngest of 3 kids. And by that time, when you're on your third kid, you're just like, hey, listen, like I've either messed up the other two or I'm trying my best. So like we're just kind of we're rolling with it with the third one. And so my mom is a big movie buff and she loved going to movies. She bought every VHS, that dates me a little bit because that's what was out when I was a kid. We're collecting VHSs. So she loved going to the movies. She probably went to the movies at least once or twice a week. And she's working full time and doing this, but that was her love. So as a kid, my brother and sisters would be in school and my mom was just like wanted to go see movies. And so she would like kind of talk me into like, hey, do you want to go see this movie? And I'm like, no, I really don't. She's like, listen, I'll buy you popcorn and candy and then we'll go to a bookstore afterwards and you get a book. And so we'd always go to this like dollar theater. It was really cool. It was this theater would do the second release of movies. So like not the main run, but like a couple months later or a month later, they would get these movies that would come in and we'd just pay $1 for a ticket. It was a great thing. There was a place called Half Price Bookstore right beside us, which is a secondhand bookstore. So people turn in their books that they don't want and they'd sell them and things like that. And they had comic books. Well, I was always into Batman the Animated Series and, my grandma knew I was in the Batman, and so she would record reruns of the Batman 66 TV show for me on VHS. I still hold on, let me.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
So this is a VHS that my grandma recorded for me. You can see it has Radiant Rainbow, Davy Crockett, but Batman on there. And so my grandma and mom just fed into my love for Batman, but when I would go to those stores, that Half Price Books, the secondhand bookstore, that's when I realized that it was more than the animated show. It was more than the 66, Adam West show, that there were in, comic book forms. And so I was picking up comic books then all the time because my mom would then start to bribe me with like, you want to go see Little Women in the movie? I'm like, no, I don't want to see that movie. Like, what kid wants to see Little Women? And she's like, I'll buy you popcorn and comics. And I was like, okay, let's go. And so that was my first exposure to comic books in that form. And I just would pick up anything Batman I could. I didn't even realize I was reading stuff out of order and that there's a series. I would just be like, oh, here's a new book. Here's this. And so my early knowledge of comic books was just a hodgepodge of like a random Superman book, a lot of random Batman books, but nothing in continuity, like nothing in order. It was just like, oh, cool, this has a cool cover. I'm picking up, I'm reading it. It wasn't until a lot later in my life that I realized, oh, there's like a whole story, like 5 of these if you string them together.
Oh yeah, like especially back in the day, man. There's like 3 or 4 different series, but the same story would run through every
Yeah,
one.
they definitely, and especially in Batman, like they don't do it as much now, which I appreciate. They only do a little bit of crossovers, but like I'm going through the Batman Nightfall stuff, and I'm on volume
Oh, that's
2.
awesome.
But I mean, it literally is. It's Batman Detective, Batman Detective, Batman Detective
Yeah.
for like it has to be like 6 years that you're picking up both volumes. You're picking up
Yeah.
both series, which it doesn't happen in this day and age. So man, it was a completely a wild west for me of like, wait, I didn't know this even how do comics work?
Yeah. I was the same like when I was coming up. Like the first book I got was like the second or third issue in the Reign of Superman.
Mm,
And reading that, I discovered that he died like a year earlier in '92. So I had to
yep.
go back and try to like piece all that together because it just blew my mind picking up a book and saying like, "What do you mean Superman's dead, dude?" Don't make. But
Right?
yeah, Nightfall was probably I think the first Batman like story I read like all together.
Yeah.
I've actually got the whole like Nightfall set on my wall over there.
Yeah. It's I know I have the whole set in let me say that. I know I have the whole set from Batman. I might be missing a couple of non-key issues in Detective because right now I'm working on my Batman run and then I'll
Yeah.
move over to Detective, but I'm pretty sure I have that too. But yeah, man, that run was it's still legendary for me.
Oh
So
yeah,
this
that's still
so
one of
good.
my favorites.
So good.
Like it's fun. Like Batman, it's like I knew of the character from watching like Super Friends, but I
Yep.
didn't really like fall in love with the character until I saw the movie when I was 9 years old
Which one?
with Michael Keaton.
Okay, the
The
89.
first, yeah, '89 Batman. Yeah, I was
Yep.
9 when that came out, and that was the movie that really like made me fall in love with the character. And then a couple years after that, they had the sequel. Then they started the animated series.
Yep.
And it's funny, I didn't discover the 1966 series until after I was about a year into the animated series.
I, yeah, it's funny. So we're probably about a 5 years difference. It sounds like in age because I know we're close.
Yeah,
Um,
I was born in '80.
so I was 85. So I missed seeing Michael Keaton Batman obviously in theaters because I was 5. But then I think Returns was what 92. It came out 2 or 3 years later, so I
I,
want to say it was
yeah, I
92.
believe it was '92.
Um, so I would have been 8, and I desperately wanted to go see Batman Returns. Like this was my show. Batman was my jam. A live action Batman. I didn't even know about the first one, but I just knew Batman and Penguin and Catwoman were in a movie, and I was like, I gotta go
Yeah,
see this. And my mom, while she loved movies, she was still very much like, hey, you're a kid, so I want to like process this a little bit with you. And I'm pretty sure she either read reviews or she watched it first, and she was like, "This is way too dark for you as an 8-year-old. Like, not a chance." I probably was realistically probably came out in the summer. I was probably 7, and she's like,
yeah.
"No, it's not happening." So my first live action Batman was 1995's Batman Forever, and so
Oh,
that
nice.
is why Batman Forever holds a special place in my heart because I will equate that like anyone's like, oh, this is the best Batman or this. I'm like 9 times out of 10, it was their first Batman that they got to see in theaters and experience
Yes.
because there's something about that nostalgia of watching. You can't, you can say all you want about Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, Val Kilmer, Nicole Kidman, Chris O'Donnell in that movie. I don't even care. I won't even hear it. I'm just like, man, is it a perfect movie? No, but has it been one that I watched more than anything? Absolutely. And do I go right back to my same spot of just feeling like pure nostalgia of like, it's pure joy watching it. Like I remember like that feeling as a kid. Like we went to, there's a pizza shop in Columbus, Ohio called Donato's. Like it was a local, now it's a chain, but we went to Donato's. I got to have pizza there, and then we went to McDonald's to pick up some of the cups and stuff from the franchise tie-in, and then I got to
I've
go
still
see the
got some
movie.
of those glasses.
Oh, I still have all the glasses. I have everything. So it was, I mean, for me, Batman Forever was my first one. So my role went Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, and then I don't think I saw Batman or Batman Returns until maybe I was in high school, so like 10 years later.
Oh yeah.
So like I don't have the nostalgia love for Batman or Batman Returns as everyone else does, because I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid. So it came out later. So I crushed that VHS of Batman Forever, and even Batman and Robin through and through, because that was 97. I was still 10 at that time. Like, and people like, oh, it's so cheesy. I'm like, man, y'all, though, you hit a 10-year-old with that, like, shoot out, like, that was perfect. Like, or surfboarding through the air with like the doors off Mr. Freeze's spaceship. Like, come on, like, that's fantastic.
I feel like it's that way with like collecting or movies, music, whatever era you grew up in is the era that you're naturally going to love the most.
It makes sense, right? Like, I mean, that's what I went back and I've been collecting all the Batman comics because that's what I grew up loving. You know, everyone always jokes about me, like, my three biggest superhero comic, not even my three biggest comic book characters are Batman, Dick Tracy, and Super Pro. Those were the three that I read all the time as a kid. And so, like, that's, now I'm just a kid with money. Like, I'm still a kid, but I just have money and I can spend it on the stuff that I wasn't allowed to buy early.
Exactly. Like, I like, as far as like you mentioned Dick Tracy, I never had any or read any of his comics, but I do remember like reading like the Sunday morning comic strips in the newspaper. They had like Dick Tracy, Dennis the Menace, Garfield, and I used to
Prince
like
Valiant, all of those. Phantom,
I used to love reading those.
And that was the first. So I got exposed to Dick Tracy in the comic strips, and I would cut out the comic strip, place it on a spiral ream notebook, and have like, you know, I would cut them out, I'd paste them, and have an entire, heck yeah, dude, Super Pro. Here, let me go on tangent. I'll get back to Dick Tracy because Vinny mentioned it. Super Pro for me got me into comics to make me think it was cool, which is weird, right? But as a kid, because Super Pro was early 90s, so I was like, what, 7 or 8 at the time Super Pro came out. I was big into sports, but I also was into this culture of comics and, you know, kind of the nerdy things, because comics weren't cool when we were kids, Russ, right? Like, I mean,
I know. I took a lot of
it
flack for
wasn't
that.
cool. We got a lot. So like, it was kind of a hidden thing. So in my mind as a kid, sports are cool, comic books aren't. So when you bring comic books and sports together, now sports were making comic books cool, because nobody who doesn't like the NFL? It's one of the most watched sports around, right? Like, so I was like, if the NFL can have a comic book, then it's cool. So yeah, man, Vinny, that's why it was so near and dear to my heart, because it was a gateway for me to feel like that comic books aren't a nerdy geeky thing. Like, it was for everybody. So that's my Super Bro tangent. But yeah, so Dick Tracy, I would cut out the comic strips from the newspaper, put them in, and make my own kind of comic book out of that, because I wasn't exposed to stuff like that. But it was honestly, it was Warren Beatty, Dick Tracy movie. Again, I can remember the exact moment of going out to eat with my family, sitting in the theater and seeing the Dick Tracy movie in all its glory. And I was going, wow, this is great. And that's why I have an entire shelf full of Dick Tracy memorabilia, because it got me into comic books and reading and things like that. So
yeah, I remember like shortly after I saw that movie with Dick Tracy, I was like in the store, and I saw like the cereal boxes, you know, they had the toys in them, and they had one with like the decoder watch thing.
So good.
And I had to have that.
Oh, it's your classic, like, hard boiled, like, detective. And I think like people forget and sleep on the Dick Tracy movie. Yeah, Al Pacino's over the top, but what do you want from a comic book villain? Of course you want that to be over the top. Yeah. It's supposed to be like Madonna. Like, I think it was nominated for 3 Oscars and won one, like, but it was like best makeup, best score, best soundtrack or something. And it was a really good movie, and you had all the palettes of colors with that. Like, it was the most definitely in that era when it came out, it was the most, you know, this felt like pulled from a comic book. The movie felt like it was pulled from the comic book with the color scheme, with the way they did the panel running. Like, man, it was so good. Dick Tracy was a great movie through and through. And anytime I can talk about Dick Tracy, or whether it is in movie form or comics, I get excited. So yeah, man, Dick Tracy was a great movie.
Man, I kind of want to watch it again now. It's been a few years.
Dude, watch it. You forget, like, Warren Beatty, Al Pacino, but there's so many like of the side characters in there that you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot so and so, or like he looks familiar, and it's going to be so confusing because they're really covered in makeup with like little face. And but Dustin Hoffman, who's an iconic actor, isn't it? Because he played Mumbles, and people forget that. And Itchy and Flat Top, it's so good. It really again, I'm biased because it was my childhood, but I will attest that it still holds up. If you look at it and say, okay, this was a movie in 90, 91, and you look at it for that, you're like, man, this is a really good movie. The kid who played, he's called the kid in Dick Tracy, was the kid also in Hook, which is another great movie with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman.
Oh yeah, it's like just about anything Robin Williams was good.
Yeah, so good. So yeah, Dick Tracy always holds a special place in my heart. So I think it was like 3 days ago, Mad Cave, the publisher, announced that they got the rights for Dick Tracy, and Alex Segura is writing it. And I've never, this is what comics does to me. Like as a kid, like Dick Tracy meant so much to me as a kid that when I saw that news, I was giddy all day. Like I posted it so much on my socials. I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, Dick Tracy's coming back to comic books. And she even knew how big of a deal it was for me. Like, cause she sees my entire shelf full of Dick Tracy memorabilia. Like it wasn't just like, why is this such a, like, she understood like, this is huge. So I'm jacked. I'm excited.
That's awesome, man. So like, as far as collecting comics, like, were you always like DC growing up, or did you ever get into Marvel?
So yes and no. I was always DC growing up for the most part, because it was Batman. I didn't really collect comics as a kid. I had comics. I read comics. I didn't collect them though. So I read Batman. My brother, who's 2 years older than me, was a Spider-Man guy. So like it worked out great. We'd watch the Batman the animated show on Fox. We'd watch X-Men, and then we'd watch Spider-Man, whatever order they were in. And so he loved the Spider-Man show. I loved the Batman show, and both like were like, oh, this X-Men's pretty good too. Like it was a great time as a kid on that afternoon Fox run.
Oh yeah, those were the best like cartoons ever. That whole
so
lineup.
Man. So I read Spider-Man books and I read X-Men books because I was familiar with the characters because of the show. But I stayed in my wheelhouse of Batman, Dick Tracy, Super Pro, which is Marvel, but also Phantom and things like that. But it was always just picking up a random book. I don't think I stepped foot in an actual comic book shop until I was in college. Because I didn't know they existed. We didn't have the internet like we do now. We didn't have, so for me, I knew I could get comic books at the secondhand bookstore, and that's what I did. I didn't realize that they were putting them out weekly, that you could get them weekly. So I always gravitated towards Batman. So I didn't get really into collecting again and full on collecting until now, 4 years ago, probably 2019. Like I always loved comics, always read comics. I read trades, graphic novels, but I wasn't really getting into collecting until a comic book shop opened up in 2019 in our town, like 2 minutes away from where I worked, like 10 minutes away from where we lived. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, hey, I'm going to go check out this comic shop. Like I'll pick up a couple Batman books, see what they're doing with the character that I loved as a kid. And once I went to that shop, I was hooked, because I went into a comic book store when I was in college. It probably was one of my first experiences, and I had such a bad experience in that shop that I didn't go back to comic book shops. Like
Oh, really?
So when I was a kid, was also in the 90s, was when the Amalgam series came out. So DC Marvel, they did their crossover.
Oh, yeah, that blew my mind when I first saw
Right.
that.
And I looked, I remember going into a shop when I was in college. Again, I didn't really know comic books had a shop. So I went into it and I was like, oh, you guys have comics. I remember picking these up at at a bookstore when I was a kid. Like, and I told the comic shop owner, I was like, listen, do you have like this book, like DC and Marvel, like they had their characters fight, and it was a really cool, like, kind of comic. I didn't know it was called the Amalgam. I didn't remember that. Like, I wasn't knowledgeable about that stuff at the time. And the comic shop owner looked at me, was like, dead in the eyes. So this had to have been what, 2005, 2006 time frame. He's like, that would never happen. DC and Marvel would never have a book together. Like, and basically it was like, you're an idiot. Like, you're a moron that you actually think this happened. And like, it was one of those like weird moments, because I'm like, it was so plugged into my subconscious.
It never happened.
It was so plugged into my subconscious that it happened, that DC and Marvel characters cross over. But I was so just like taken aback that this shop was like, no. And so like, I had this like existential crisis of like, am I forgetting? Am I just remembering things differently? And it was so cool. Now I got to see what Gore says. Yeah, man. So, man, I love those old strips. So what's really cool about in Columbus here, I was just doing press for a con, but we have a museum here in Columbus called the Billy Ireland Cartoon Museum. It is one of the largest cartoon comic museums in the world. And so they have a museum where you can go up. They have Chester Gold, who created Dick Tracy, his work desk there on display. And you can see awesome. The entire side of it is charred from like where he would burn it so he could heat up the inks on his panels that he was working for the strips, so they would dry faster. But they have Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes. They have Prince Valiant. They have the Phantom strips up there. They have Bill and Men's Foxtrot. All, for better or for worse, but all these classic comic strips from the, that are always on display, and you can see these original artworks. But what's really cool about it is they have a reading library, and you can call into the museum and say, hey, do you have this issue of this comic book, or do you have this strip from 1967 of whatever, right? Like anything. And they're like, if they have it, they will pull it out, put it in a reading room for you to actually touch and read and go through. You don't like
That's
and
awesome.
It's the coolest thing ever. If they have it in their library, you can go check it out, and it's free, and it's so cool to do. So like, if you are a cartoon or comic nerd, it's fantastic. I forget why I went on. Gore was talking about the comic strips, but yeah, it was, to go back to the comic shop. I was really put off by comic shops at that time because, the guy didn't know what he was talking about. I obviously was right. I'm always right, but it was just so disheartening to me because he was just so down about it that I was like, no. So finally, then I went back to a shop then in 2019. So this is, again, I loved comics. I read comics all the time, but I really didn't step foot in the comic shops and feel comfortable being in a comic shop until 2019 when one opened up. I got a pull list then, and I joked with my wife. I was like, I'm just going to get a short box to fill it up. And now I'm looking this way because that's where I store all my comic books. And I'm probably at like 30 long boxes now of comics, and you see all the ones behind me. But when I was in high school and college, I was still picking up trades. So I was reading Walking Dead. I was doing all of this, I was reading a lot more like in trade. So that's when I read Superman, Emperor Joker, or things like that. It was all in trades for me.
That's awesome, man. Like the comic shop thing is like, I live in such a small town that I didn't know what a comic shop was either. I would get like my local books every week. I would stop up at the gas station and spend my
Yeah.
school lunch money on that week's comic. And I would find them like there or at flea markets and stuff. It was, gosh, I want to say maybe 2015 when I first started getting back into collecting again. It's when I discovered like comic shops for the first time.
Yeah, I didn't experience comic shops. Like I said, I went into it here or there, but I was really intimidated because after that first experience, I didn't want to say anything. I was like, well, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, someone's gonna they're gonna think I'm stupid. And I mean, I'm blessed living in Columbus. Like I said, we got the museum that I just talked about. I have 8 comic book shops within a 20-minute radius of my house.
Dang, man, that's awesome.
You can't beat that. And so I'm now on the other end of the spectrum. Like, I have a really good relationship with probably 7 of the 8 shops. One shop prices at the register, so I don't like them. And
oh yeah,
I don't have a good
my local shop does that here for all his old books. He took away all the $1 and $2 boxes and $5 boxes and just started eBay pricing everything. Yeah. So I just stopped going.
Listen, I'm fine with that if you want to do that, but don't do it at the register. Don't put a book out there with nothing on it. Like, I'm doing your job for you. So that's my rant. But yeah, so I'm really I fell into the hobby in 2019. I fell into it really hard because, man, I'm hooked.
Yeah, when I got back into 2015, instead of getting the new books that was coming out at that time, which I think was the New 52 era, I was focused on getting all the old books that I had when I was a kid back again. And so luckily, the majority of them were still $1 and $2 books. So it was I pretty much rebuilt my entire collection that I had as a kid, plus some, just minus a few books that took off. But yeah, I got lucky that the majority of the stuff that I liked was $1.
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, when I was getting even back in the collecting in 2019, before the pandemic, stuff was. I remember seeing the first Poison Ivy on a shelf, and it was $150 or something on the back wall, and I was like, "Oh, that's a little too pricey for me at the time." And I'm 3 years later going,
"Oh yeah,
oh my gosh, I would have scooped that up so fast." I was like, what? I'm an idiot.
I made that mistake with a couple books back when that the pandemic was just about to start.
Yeah.
I didn't the most money I'd spent on a book. I didn't it was 2018 when I got my first slab, and that was $100. And that gave me such anxiety to spend that much on one book.
I couldn't spend over $100. That's why I didn't.
It was so hard, man.
I was like,
I just put it on the card, and I made 5 payments to get it paid off instead of buying it all at one time. But then a year later, I think 2019, I saw I think it's issue 359, Detective Comics, the first Barbara Gordon Batgirl.
Yep.
It was a 2.5 slab, and I think it was $175. And I wanted to buy it so bad, but I was like, I can't spend that much right now. I just can't do it. So I waited a little bit, and I looked up again about a year or so later, and that same 2.5 was $400. And I was like,
what did I do?
It's gone. But luckily, I think maybe 2021 they came out with the facsimile, so I just picked that up, and I was happy with it because all I really wanted to do was read the story.
Yep, I get it, man. That's the part about collecting. I'm like, man, I dropped the ball so so much early on.
That's one thing I love about the facsimiles now.
Yeah.
You can like, unless you're going to read them digitally, there's no way to like physically hold some of those books and read them without the facsimile.
Yeah. I've been doing. I have a bunch of the Batmans in the Golden Age collected. So I've been doing the collector trades. And man, that's been great.
I've got one of those with the. I think it starts from the first appearance, the Golden Age collection. Yeah.
Yep.
I love these books, man, because that's like the only way I pretty much can read like Golden Age stuff without like resorting to digital. And I just love to have the actual books.
Yeah, I do too. I do dabble in digital a lot, and I appreciate it for like for reading when I'm on vacation.
Yeah. There's been a few times when I've gone like if I've got a book that's only in a slab and I don't have a raw copy or a reprint, I'll go digital to read it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. That's how I read Savage She-Hulk 1 and Superman 123, the first prototype Supergirl. I had to read those digitally because I just had the slabs. I didn't have raw copies or reprints.
Right. I just picked up Savage She-Hulk. The first is Savage the first appearance, or is it Sensational?
Yeah, it's Savage She-Hulk. Yeah.
So I picked that up. I want to say a year ago or something. A shop had it dirt cheap, and I want to say it was right after like the TV series came out, and so like
it wasn't popping
very much. It was and I was just like, thank you. I will take that, please. I like the show. So I was like, thank you. So I kind of like secretly, I was like, if there's a show if it's about a character I don't love, like if it's Dick Tracy or Batman, I'm like, please be successful, even though it's going to hurt me. But I'm like, man, if that's the one that I kind of like, if you bomb, I can get your book still pretty cheap.
For real. I picked that book up before, I think about a year before the show was even announced. That was the first slab that I picked up in a 9.6. Nice. Because I remember reading some of those stories when I was little, and I liked the character and I liked the story.
Yeah. So
I picked it up before the hype for the show hit, so I got it pretty cheap too.
Yeah.
But I still need to watch the show. I don't have any streaming services, so I like miss like everything. But it's still one that's on the list to watch.
I liked it. I get it. People don't like it. I'm not the biggest like She-Hulk person, so I can't like defend it of like, well, this is like this. But from the little I read of the John Burns series, where it's a little more like breaking the fourth wall.
I think that was the Sensational series.
Yeah,
right?
like it felt in line with that. Again, I can't be like, oh, I'm not gonna sit there and say like, if you don't like the show, like you didn't read the comics, because I haven't read all the comics, but it felt more in line with that.
There's a ton of the Sensational series that I haven't read. I've mostly read the first series, Savage She-Hulk.
Yeah, I know like people were upset like that she was twerking or something on one of the episodes. I'm like, there literally is an issue where they're like,
the only reason I know that happened is because like
make her jump rope naked, like on the issue, and like you're like, oh, but twerking is going against everything She-Hulk stands for. I'm like,
I remember seeing that meme all over Instagram when that happened. It was just like every other post was She-Hulk twerking.
Yeah, and she was twerking, but I'm like, fine, if you don't like that, that's fine. But like in the series, the Sensational one, she jump rope and nude because it was like a whole gimmick for the book. So I'm like, I don't know if it's that out of line from. Again, I haven't read it all, but I was just like, man, we need to pump the brakes.
Yeah, I do. I remember some pretty like crazy covers from the Sensational run.
Yeah, there's like swimsuit issues. Like it gets a little like saucy, and you're like, oh, but. It's all good.
So I would probably dig the show if I ever get around to seeing it.
If you get around,
it kind of bugs me that they don't release them on like DVD or Blu-ray or anything.
Well, I heard one of the Disney Plus series just got released on DVD, or they're going to I think WandaVision. So I do think they're going to eventually.
Hopefully, they're probably testing the waters to see how it sells.
I think they're going to check that collectability market of it.
Yeah,
because
I
I
hope
think
so. Because like I can't see like because there's so many shows, but so many different streaming services. It's like I don't want to get like 5 streaming services to watch like 5 shows because there's like one show on each channel or something.
yeah, don't do what we do. Because that's exactly what we do in our household.
Yeah.
And we're like, do we really need this? And we're like, oh, we should cancel it. And as soon as we're about to cancel it, another series shows up. They're like, well, we want to watch
Yeah, they
it.
come out with like another new season of it. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's come out yet because I'm so behind on the shows, but I know like they're doing a second season of Loki, I think.
I don't think it's come out yet. It's coming out, I think, in October or November. And I only say that because my nephew, who is now doing the comic book collecting and YouTubing, is a big
Nice.
Loki fan. So I feel very confident that if it was out, I would know because he would be like, "Did you watch episode 1 yet of Loki?" So I think it comes out in October or November. But yes, they're doing a season 2.
Yeah, I did get to see the first season of that. I liked it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good. I dug it.
Didn't like as far as like characters like Loki and stuff, I didn't really know a lot about them until the movies came out.
Yep.
Because
Same.
like for the first couple years I was collecting comics, it was all Superman. And it was like the animated series and stuff like Spider-Man, X-Men
Yep.
that got me into Marvel and getting those comics. But that was like a few years later because the first
Right.
couple years it was just Superman for me.
Yeah.
So there's like so many characters that have been around forever that I still don't know a lot about.
Yep. Same. I'm learning every day. So I am 100% like I don't know everything about comics and I don't even attempt to know because I'm like I don't know as much as 80% of people out there.
Yeah, it's like the majority of my knowledge just is like Superman books from the 90s.
Right?
Like,
Same
there's
mind.
still like I'll hear like I'll see like Instagram posts and stuff with like this artist is doing this hot new book and I'm like, who's that artist? I never heard of him. I know like Jim Lee and Dan Jurgens and John Byrne, all the old school guys. I don't know any of these new guys.
Yep. Well, Dan Jurgens. So in Action Comics, Philip Kennedy Johnson's writing that, but there's a backup story by Dan Jurgens, and I want to say Lee Weeks is doing the art. So, or the last issue, I think it just wrapped up. It was a 7-part issue, but yeah, I'm loving when they give some of these old heads from when I was reading comics, and I mean maybe not even old, but just my generation of comic creators when I was reading in the 90s. Man, it was good to see them back.
Oh yeah. I'd like that with I think just about everything, like not just collectibles, but like movies, music. Some of my favorite athletes, they were all like from the 90s. Like they were like I think I quit watching football when like my last favorite player retired. It's like after guys like Brett Favre and Jerry Rice and all those guys like Elway, all those guys retired, I just kind of lost interest because those are like that was like my era and my guys, man.
I get it.
So it's like everything, comics, music, TV, movies. I'm still
so you're just stuck in the 90s.
Yeah.
Just no matter what. Love it. So good.
What's up, Tim? But man, I kind of lost my train of thought.
We were talking. You were talking how I got into collecting comics. I think that was the last question. I feel like you've asked me like 3 questions, and I've droned on for like 40 minutes about each one. So
it's all good, man. I love like hearing like especially collecting origin stories. I love hearing that from people that just love the books and the characters and just. Are you reading anything new that you like?
Man, I'm reading so much new. I'm reading a lot of DC Marvel indie books right now. I'm probably getting anywhere from 10 to 15 books a week still on on my pull or picking up. What's one that I really dig right now? Sacrificers from Rick Remender. I want to say it's Image Comics is doing it. Issue 2 is out. I think issue 3 comes out or Wednesday. That's been a really good book. I was telling you another one that comes out tomorrow or Wednesday is Monica, which is from Fantagraphics. Daniel Klaus, who wrote Ghost World and 8-Ball, doing a lot of the cartoon stuff and Art School Confidential. This is his first book back since 7 years. And I got to hear him talking to Comic-Con this weekend. And I picked up the book early and got him to sign it. And I've been digging through that, and it's been fantastic. So if you, again, Daniel Klaus has a style that, like, it's not your token, like, traditional comic books. It's a more of a cartoon style. And it's, you know, it's a little deeper in the stuff, but man, what a great creator. And so I'm digging that right now. Like I said, I'm just reading it. There's so many good stuff. DC, I love DC and Marvel though too. Like I'm into the big two. I don't think there's really much I'm not reading at this point.
I know earlier before we went live, we were talking about the Superman 78 series. You telling me that they're coming out with a kind of a sequel story to that.
Yeah. So Robert Venditti, who wrote the first one, is coming back out with a new run with Metallo, kind of in Russia, dealing with the Cold War stuff. A new artist is on it. That's coming out in November. And I know Robert's also doing a Sandman book that's coming out in part of the DC's golden era, golden age. And Tim Sheridan's doing a Alan Scott Green Lantern. So they're starting to dabble back into some of the golden age DC superheroes. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Oh, I gotta show this board. Sorry, hold on.
I know that definitely sounds like a jumping on like point for me to get back into collecting new comics. And I'm definitely gonna pick up that new Superman 78 series.
So yeah, Gore. It comes out Wednesday, but because he was at the con this weekend, I got it early, and
nice.
he signed it. But it's your token. I'm gonna find stuff that's not gonna spoil it. I mean, it's just your token. Daniel Klaus artwork, fantastic. Fantagraphs was at the con, really cool stuff. So yeah, highly recommend. I'm only 30 pages into a 100-page book of that. And it's been really good so far. So my thinking is, Gore, if you love what Daniel does, this stuff. So yeah, and what's really cool, I'll have to find it, but the con I was at was called Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. They have a YouTube. I know they videotaped all the talks. So if you're interested in Daniel talking a little bit about Monica and his work in comics, there is a interview with him. It's probably 45 minutes from the Q&A and stuff, but it's on YouTube. So look up Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, Daniel Klaus. You can probably find it. If it's not up yet, it'll be up, I'm sure, this week. But it was cool to get to kind of talk about the book, but he didn't want to talk about the book because he's kind of like, I don't want to, people don't know right now, so I don't want to spoil stuff about what it is. So it was a cool thing. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, the art style, man, that definitely reminded me of like the old school like comic strip style.
Yeah, well, that's
cool.
And that's the style that like a lot of the stuff from the company Fantagraphics does is that style. So another one that does stuff like that in that same style. Man, I'm just running away. Hold on, I'll be right back.
That's cool, man. I like another book I heard was coming out recently was they're doing a 30th anniversary of the Reign of Superman. And that's another one, like, I'm definitely going to jump on that because the Reign story is like where I started reading.
Yeah.
So I definitely got to pick up a 30th anniversary. I think it's just a one shot, which is good.
Yeah. Another one in that same vein. This is Dirk Backdurf. He did a book called my friend Dahmer, he also did one about the Kent State shootings. It's called Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio. And he did like Trash and some other things. But so Dirk does the same style, like not, but it's that cartoon vibe. And what's really cool is when I met Dirk, he did a sketch for me in the book.
That's cool.
But same vibe. But yeah, like Dirk is from Northeast Ohio and went to high school with Jeffrey Dahmer, and so like he was kind of telling the story of it from that. Really cool to again. I love DC and Marvel. I love superhero style comics, but I am definitely dipping my toe more into like the indie cartooning world of comics, like Dirk Backderf, Daniel Klaus, Craig Thompson's Blankets, and Goodbye Chunky Rice. Like that style of comics. I'm really just falling into that realm a little bit more. So I like it all. I love comics.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
Man, comics are
great.
I've
heard a lot of different people like are leaning a lot more toward indie comics now for stories, and I just like there's so many things that are coming out. It's like I hear like this is such a great story.
Well, I think the part of that is with indie comics, I think it allows creators to tell a story that they want to tell with no strings attached, right? Like if you're telling a Superman, you're telling a Batman story, you're gonna have to answer to some higher ups that are gonna be like, you gotta make sure you don't do this, you don't
try to stick in like a certain continuity.
Yes, to a degree, but like I feel like now like a lot of indie creators can tell a story that they want to I mean, a great example is Mark Russell was doing his book called Second Coming, and it was going to basically be Superman and Jesus were roommates. And before it even came out, there was so much backlash that DC dropped it. They're like, we can't do this. Luckily, they gave Mark the rights, and he took it to another publisher. But he then was able to, he just changed the character from Superman to Sunstar, but he's able to tell the stories that he wanted to tell because it wasn't hinging on, well, Superman won't do this, Batman wouldn't do this, Wonder Woman wouldn't do this. And so I think I think creators will do a lot of stuff in DC, and we can get a lot of good stuff in DC and Marvel. I still, like I said, I'm a big fan of those properties and those publishers. And you get a little bit more with like your black labels to allow them to expand.
Yeah.
But I do think there are times like you'll see like James Tynion, Chip Zdarsky go back into indie comics a little bit more, even though they're still doing some of the big two, because they want to tell a story that they want to tell and not feel handicapped by the publisher or higher ups to say like, no. But yeah, Gore, Fantagraphics Comics is, it's like watching independent films. And you got, 2 of those, 3 actually of Daniel Klaus's books were made in the independent films, Ghost World, Art School Confidential. And then I want to say it was Wilson is the other one. Woody Harrelson played a character of Wilson. And it was, it's the art style in that and the comic, like, I wish I had the book so I could show you, but it's the idea of like basically this guy's like it's a lot of like 1-page, 2-page short stories, and one of the 1-page stories is this guy's like walking his dog, and like someone walks by and it's like, oh, cute dog, oh, your dog's so cute, oh, your dog's so cute, and then like someone walks by his dog and him walking and doesn't say anything, and he's just like, you effing a-hole, like because he didn't say anything, like it didn't even do anything, but everyone else would take the time to say like, oh, your dog's so cute. And it's those types of moments where I'm just like, oh, that's brilliant, that's smart, that's funny. And I was just like, it's things like that I get drawn into indie comics about. It's so good.
It seems like there's a lot, like you said, like a lot more freedom with the characters, the stories, to just come up with these original ideas and just kind of go in any direction you want. And like, do anything you want, really.
Yeah. Well, because it really is your story. It's what you
Yeah.
want to talk about, and it is so good for creators to have that outlet. And I know some will go to a DC or a Marvel so they can build their audience and then come back to independent comics so that then they can tell the story they want to tell. And so that's why when I see a DC or a Marvel book that I really like, I'm like, man, hats off to them, because they probably had to jump through a lot of hoops to get to be a good story.
I know you mentioned Zdarsky. I had no idea he did indie stuff, because I just discovered him with I think his 2019, maybe his Daredevil run.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed that run. So I had no idea he was known for like indie books too. Like,
yeah. He did Sex Criminals with Matt Fraction before he did which was from Image, which was before Daredevil run. And I know he did some others, but right now he's doing Public Domain, or he did Public Domain. And he's doing a couple others. I'm blanking on it right now, but yeah, so he does. I mean, he did Daredevil. He was doing Batman at the same time. But yeah, so
that's
man,
pretty cool. I know, like, growing up, the only thing that I really ventured into the indie for was I remember reading Spawn back in the 90s, and some Witchblade and Gen 13.
Yep.
And I remember one called Danger Girl that I only knew about because they came out with like a PlayStation 1 video game called Danger Girl. And I saw the video game first, and then I found out there was a comic. But yeah, it's like those were like the only 4 or 5 I would like venture into as a kid outside Marvel and DC.
Yeah. Yeah, Gore, I would love to have Daniel on the show. I kind of froze up when I met him, so I didn't and it was late in the night. So when I was doing the signing, so I wasn't like trying to I do a podcast. And but yeah, no, if I can get Daniel on the show, that would be great. I would love to talk with Daniel Klaus.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I was just thinking, like, I've never actually got to meet any creators or writers at cons. I went to HeroCon last June, but I didn't like stand in line to meet anybody. So that's like a goal of mine for next year's Heroes Con next June, is to hopefully meet some writers or artists and maybe get some stuff signed.
Yeah, man.
I would like one of them I've always wanted to meet was Dan Jurgens, just because he wrote and was like art on like some of the first comics I ever read. So I've always wanted to meet him.
You're down south, right?
Yeah, I'm North Carolina.
Yeah. So I've done Terrificon in Connecticut the past few years, and Dan Jurgens has been there both years. And this last year was almost like a Superman, kind of a 90s Superman panel of creators. That was Dan Jurgens was there. Louise Simonson was there. Brent Benning was there. Like, so it was a lot of people who had done.
I feel like I would nerd out so hard.
It's tough. Like, I talk to creators all the time, like on conversations like this, but then still when I'm like meet them in person, even if I've talked to them, I'm still like, hi, I like your stuff. Please sign this. And I'm I just freeze. I'm like, I don't know how to interact with you.
I know, it's because I'm like kind of introverted anyway. So to like walk up to somebody I've never like actually met before, I just know their work. Like, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I could picture myself at the con next year standing in front of somebody's table and just slowly like backing away because I get nervous or something.
I get it. Like, I'm not introverted, but I'm not fully extroverted. Like, I'm in between. So like doing YouTube stuff like this, like has been a challenge to like get out of my comfort zone. So like when I started doing YouTube, I was like, oh, all right, here we go.
Yeah. But I think the first 2 years I did YouTube, I wouldn't do any live streams because I was terrified.
Dude, I still don't do live streams.
Just freezing.
Like I let me say that I won't host a live stream. I'm on live streams all the time, but I don't want to host them because I'm like, nope. If I don't like what I'm doing, I can just right now I go like, oh, cool, I'm gonna stop my camera and I'm gonna leave, and it's not gonna be uncomfortable. But if I'm hosting it, it's like no, like. So I get it.
Yeah, I know. I was like still like I've been doing YouTube for a little over 6 years now, and I was still like real nervous about starting this show. And but I've always wanted to have like a show with different guests from the community.
Yeah.
But I was so nervous about like starting anything like
6
this.
years, man, legend.
It's been a while, man. I know I started with Funko Pops, but I think I did that for like 2 years, and then I moved back into the comic collecting thing.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm fascinated by that stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, for the first maybe 6 or 7 months, I wouldn't even get in front of the camera when I first started. So like my first like 8, 9, 10 videos or something, I'm just behind the camera.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Do it at your own space, at your own pace.
Oh, it took me years to get comfortable enough to like just do hangouts like this on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. John from John's Comics he's a legend at that. He makes it so easy.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of his, especially the X-Men Omnibus show that he does.
Man, John was one. Here's a fun fact for you that most people don't know. John is one of the main reasons I stayed in YouTube.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, I got into it in 2020 when a pandemic hit. And I was watching like Comic Jabroni, John, Rod the Rican, Perry, although that crew. And John was hosting they did a online Comic Con called Comic Core or something like it, but it was all these creators that they had, and John was interviewing one of the creators. And I remember going to myself going, I didn't know who John was. I just was watching his help, and I was like, I could do that. And I miss Comic Cons. I miss talking to creators, even though I would freeze up talking to them. So I kind of started doing that. And I remember then John was doing in 2020, he was doing a show called Drinks and Movies. He did one episode, and I was in the chat talking so much that he literally messaged me, and we didn't talk very often, but he messaged me then following the show. He's like, do you just want to hop on the show with me next time? Because like, you're literally like, you were in the entire stream and you know a lot about movies. Like, and I was like, sure. And so I started doing stuff that with John and that's when I really started to expand it. I did comic trivia stuff on Bruce and Stephanie's channel, but that's when I really started to expand in the community, was watching John's Comics with Kids and Jabroni, and Perry and them, and going, oh, I think I could do this. So yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So yeah, when Gore mentioned John, I'm like, yeah, man, luckily he's not going to watch this because I'm on it. So like, he won't watch anything I'm on. So like, he won't hear me say anything nice about him. But like, it was one of those weird.
Just start trashing Hickman's X-Men run and he'll get work.
And his censors will come up. Yeah. But it is weird. Like when you're doing this YouTube thing, and like you watch people all the time, right? And like you don't have a connection or interaction with them. And then like, so that moment, like someone messages you or you get that interaction, or kind of like you freeze up because you're like, how do I talk to this person? Like, because I can talk in a chat all the time, but then you're like, oh wait, like I don't, like it's like dating. Like I don't want to like screw this up. Like what if John thinks I'm weird?
Yeah. I know, like, so I think like I was pretty much just just showing Funko Pops for like the first year and a half, 2 years. And I was getting really burnt out on that. And I was getting comics again at the time, but I hadn't thought about showing them yet. And my channel was just really floundering. And of all things, I was doing like a Marvel Superheroes Lego gameplay stream. And Matt, the boy who had 7, popped in out of nowhere. And he's the one that introduced me to like the comic book community. And I discovered like all these channels posting comics.
Yeah.
And that was like the reason that I stayed on YouTube, because it's like, hey, man, all these people are showing comics. Other people actually love comics. So
It's
I started showing them and stayed on YouTube and kept at it. And
it's
and
that's so weird,
pretty
right?
much through Matt, I met like just about everybody else in the community. I think Matt's the one that introduced me to John.
Yep. Yep. Because they did comic gories together. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing is like I started so I had Instagram and Twitter and stuff before YouTube a couple months before, but when I did YouTube, I got the Bearded Comic Bro on YouTube just to steal like the name and keep it. I did a video. If you look at the very first videos I did 3 videos. I did 1 a month. And I was at one point it was in March, early March. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do a video a month. This is way too much work. Like I can't do this.
Yeah.
And the pandemic hit. And I remember watching Jabroni, and he was doing these top 5 like easy to get Batman villain key books. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is the stuff that I love. And, and that's why Edwin, he was one of those first people that got me into doing the YouTube. And that's why I always mention Jabroni when I can, because, RIP, but he was one of the mainstays of why I got into doing comic YouTube and staying with it, because
Edwin was amazing. He was an amazing
he reached
dude.
out to me, and we talked, and we had conversations about how do we stay in the game and how do we do this and create like that content. And so, yeah, it was when I'm on this more content, it's so funny because then come pandemic, I was at one stage doing 3 edited videos a week. I had something Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it was slowly killing me. But I was like, no, I gotta do this. I gotta build the brand. I gotta do 3 videos a week, or I'm not gonna grow. And I was just like, nope, I can't do this. So now and then I got it down to 2, like a year later, and now it's down to 1.
Yeah.
If I get you get 2 edited videos from me in a week, you're like, it's a good week. So enjoy.
I was saying, like, I would try to like do a schedule when I first started and like have it on a certain day. And it never worked for me, because I would like, if I got something, I would open it, show it. If I bought something, I would show it, like just do an off cuff video. Like I didn't even know how to edit until like after the first year I was on YouTube. It was just, I didn't even have this tripod that's like set my phone on to record. It was just me like holding the phone in one hand, trying to open the box with another, and like not drop stuff.
What do I do?
Like I didn't even figure out how to edit until like a year in.
It
was bad.
We're all learning it, and yeah, that's it's funny like that. I didn't even think I was gonna do YouTube. Like I literally just secured the name, so I had it when I was like, I'm gonna do Bearded Comic Bro. And man, but yeah, I started on Instagram and Twitter with that first, so it's crazy.
Yeah, it was. I probably did YouTube like 3 years or more before I moved over to Instagram and started doing stuff over there and figuring that out. It took me like, I felt so slow when I first got Instagram because I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know how to like. I could barely figure out how to post a photo.
Dude, but if it wasn't, all right, you want the Bearded Comic Bro origin story?
Let's hear it, man.
So, I'm just talking. Like, we didn't even talk about how long you do the show, so I apologize if I'm running.
I don't like. I've had people go. Ryan Magic Lasso, he went over 3 hours. Flicks and Comics, we went almost 4 hours.
Wow. If I go 4 hours,
so there's like no.
I'm just
there's
saying,
no
if I
like
go 4
real
hours, my wife
structure.
will kill me.
Yeah, we could just go until you get tired of talking, man.
But it was 2019. I was out to dinner with my wife. The girls were somewhere there, grandma and grandpa's or something. And my wife said to me, and if you're familiar with my channel, she's a big part of my channel and my part of my show, which is great in and of itself. But we were at dinner. We were at the Cheesecake Factory, and we were sitting outside, and she was like, "Hey, so I did something today," and I was like, that's weird to say that. Like, what do you mean? Like she was being like really coy about it, and she had started a fake Instagram, and basically it was like she wanted to go like do like post like these artsy photos of like coffee and like murals on a wall, like basic stuff, and that but it was something that spoke to her, and so she started a Instagram channel and she had like it wasn't her own personal one, and I was like, I remember looking at her go, well, that's not fair, I want a fake Instagram account too. And I was like, well, what would I do? And she does have the best reviews, and we're working on one again. So, and we'll get to that in the story too. But I was like, well, what do I do? I was like, and she literally said to me, well, why don't you talk about comic books? Because whenever you post about it on your personal stuff, no one cares. And I was like, okay. So in September of 2019, I started an Instagram. A week later, I went to Twitter and I put in bearded. But my Instagram, I started as Bearded Comic Nerd. That was my name.
Oh, really?
I was Bearded Comic Nerd for a week and a half. I went to Twitter then, and it was one letter longer than you could have allowed, like in your username. So I was like, well, I want Bearded Comic. Like, what's a 3-letter word then I could do? And I literally was like, well, I'm a bro. I can do bro. So I almost was Bearded Comic Nerd. And I think there is someone now, because either Twitter or they're on TikTok or something, but like I think Twitter has expanded it since. So at one point I almost was Bearded Comic Nerd. So I became Bearded Comic Bro. So I did Instagram and Twitter, and it was all because of my wife had started a fake account that doesn't exist. So if you're like, oh, I want to see what she canceled it like a month afterwards. She's like, there's too much energy. I don't want to post. Like if you look at Mrs. Bearded Instagram, like I think she hasn't posted something like 5 months. That's probably being generous. Probably like 8 months. Just because she's like, I don't, and she doesn't post on the personal stuff. Like, so it's just, that's personality, which is great and fine. But I mean, she was the main reason I got into doing Instagram and then Twitter, and then I dabbled and fell into YouTube because of that. And then I started to find my voice on YouTube of what I wanted to do. And it was very Gary and Jabroni had both at the same time, probably around in February, March, did a there was a trend going around that was quiz your significant other about comic book. Like, can they guess what this comic book character is? And that was, how like YouTube trends pop up and everyone does them. And so I watched them do it, and I was like, oh, I want to see if I can get Stacy to do this with me. And she reluctantly said yes. And it became such a success. Like the second episode, someone's like, well, that's not fair. She should quiz you. And and that's then how Name That Character came about, when we did that for almost 2-3 years. And it's not dead, but it's just on hiatus. We've done 99 episodes of that. We have to still do our 100th
It's gotta
episode.
be hard it's gotta be hard to come up with like different things to do.
And that's why like it started to become such a chore. I think by like episode 75, we were just like, oh my goodness, like of all the shows we do, like this, it was the most fun. But dang it, John's here. It's all right. I've already said anything nice about him earlier. He won't watch it on the rewind, so it's fine.
What's up, John?
But yeah, so like we kind of found our niche in YouTube of doing the Name the Character stuff, but it become like episode 70, 75, like I'd be like, hey, Stacy, we need to do a Name That Character. And she'd be like, oh, like, what do we do? Like, so I was like, all right, let's make it through the last, and let's get to 100 episode. And so we've been sitting on like, the last year, it took us like almost a year, to go through like 5 episodes, like from like 93 to 95. But you're right. You mentioned Hickman, and here comes John. And it just became such a, like, so now like we still are going to do 100th episode at some point, and then it's going to just be more casual when it pops up. But like,
Yeah.
she became, Stacey became such a integral part of my channel because she was such she was, and she's been such a champion of, hey, do what you love. How can I help? And
That's
and
awesome,
so like
man.
Gord said, like the comic book reviews, we're gonna do that again. We got some comic book reviews that we're working on. It's funny that Gore mentioned Lost because Stacey and I, my wife and I, are going through Lost right now.
Oh yeah.
So
I
Kate,
love that show.
what's her,
Evangeline Lilly.
yes, she's coming to Comic-Con in Columbus
Oh, really?
in December. And so Stacey and I watched Lost starting in probably like 6. I've watched it like 2 or 3 times through. We started watching it 6 years ago, right around when our first daughter was born, and we got through 3 seasons, and then life just happened. And so we are now going through all the seasons, because I told her, I'm like, if we do 2 episodes a day, we can get through and see it before it completely, we can see it in completion before we meet her at the Comic-Con in December. So we're on season 2 right now. And what we're doing, sorry, Gore, but I love Lost.
Yeah, I've probably seen the whole series 5 or 6 times all the
I've
way
already got
through.
my Todd McFarlane Lost action figure bought inbox, so I can have Kate sign it. And what,
Man, I didn't know they had figures.
they did 2 seasons of figures. So I think the first batch was Kate, Jack, Hurley, Locke, Charlie, and then Shannon. And Shannon's just literally just chilling in a bikini because classic Todd McFarlane action figure. That's what they do. Sawyer, yeah. I don't think was until the 2nd season, and same with Mr. Echo. And I want to say,
man, that's
awesome. Who was the other one? There's a couple others, but yeah. So, and a series that people can look out if you like Lost, that will happen. We've already recorded 1 episode, but we're not releasing it yet. After every season we finish of Lost, my wife and I are recording reactions, thoughts for her, kind of going through it basically for the first time, because she has a very bad memory. So she's like, what happened? So like as soon as season 1 wrapped up, we recorded our review of like, what did you think? Who are your favorite characters? Who did you not like? What are your expectations for the show? And we're going to do those after each season. And then we're going to release them weekly once it's all, because I feel like if I do it now and release it early, people are going to like, some person's going to jump in on the comments and be a jerk and be like, oh, well, this happens and blah, blah, blah. And
always somebody,
she has seen up to season 3, but she hasn't seen past it. So I don't want to spoil it. Like I really want to get those reactions of what she thinks going through. And it could be great because she loved season 1, 2, and 3 when we watched it. But I have a feeling she's going to kind of veer off of this is driving me insane. And but we're going to release those. So yeah, 1 episode's already recorded of her reactions and thoughts of season 1. We're going to do it with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then maybe we'll bring on John and Ryan and some others to just have a big fun talk about it when it's all said and done. Man. But yeah, so that's that. You're getting, I haven't even told anyone, but you're getting us behind the scenes. We're going to do exclusive on our show. We've got 1 episode recorded. Once we get through the whole season, we'll we'll drop those off. And so even if you don't like Lost, you can kind of watch it from someone's eyes of seeing it for the first time, at least for the first 3. And then the 4, 5, 6, she's going to be just like, oh, I didn't have any idea what's happening. So, but yeah, so I'm grateful for Stacy that is so involved in, she goes to cons with me and she creates TikToks and shows with me of reviewing comic books that she's never read, or Mrs. Beard reads a comic, or Mrs. Beard reviews a comic book movie. And it just is fun because I think I'm such enthralled in the culture that she's like a casual bystander, that it gives people kind of an idea of like, hey, here's another perspective of someone who's not so ingrained into, oh, Batman would never do this or whatever. She doesn't know what Batman would do. So if she likes it or she doesn't like it, and it's kind of fun to have those perspectives.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's cool, man. Those videos are always fun.
Yeah. So I'm blessed that she does that. So I know I'm lucky because there's a lot of people like, oh, my wife would never do that. I'm like, well, somehow my wife decided she would.
I don't know if you are much of a gamer or played any games, but I remember back, I want to say in the PlayStation 3 era, they actually came out with the Lost video game.
They do. There's a Lost game where you can run around. I
never owned it, but I remember renting
I played it
once.
Xbox 360.
I rented it on PlayStation 3 back in the day.
You weren't one of the main characters. You were a random survivor.
Yeah.
And you ran around and trying to hide in the bamboo shoots from the smoke monster. And I remember it was not a good game, but now I want to revisit it because I'm like, I'm super curious to see.
Yeah, it would be cool to go back and check it out.
But because it's you, and I've got the comic that Walt was reading in season 1. It was a Green Lantern Flash book that Ron Mars wrote, and so it's cool to get things like that. And
that's awesome.
Pop culture phenomenon.
Now I want to go back and watch that show again.
Do it.
I've already seen it like 4 or 5 times.
Go back and watch it, and then you can see. We'll probably start to release them in December. You can start to watch Mrs. Bearded.
That's awesome. Definitely looking forward to those videos, man.
So yeah, man, it'll be fun. I'm excited to see that because we're about like 6 episodes in the Lost, and so when we're done with this interview, she's gonna be like, "Are you done? Can we watch some Lost?"
Yeah, I remember back in the day when it was originally airing, there was I can't remember the YouTube channel. I don't think it exists anymore, but they would always do these like themed recaps after every episode, and they would be like have like this like makeshift Dharma station behind them, and like be like cosplayed as a different character each like week.
So good. Well, I mean, what are you gonna if you can, at least with comic books, you can always veer your content. But if you're like, I'm gonna be a Lost YouTube channel, and you got 6, maybe 7, maybe 8 years, you can milk that, and then you're done.
Yeah,
you're like nobody like, oh, let's revisit this. You could be.
I don't even think those videos are on YouTube anymore. I think like they just took them all down. But they were like so fun to watch back in the day.
Probably for the wiser.
Yeah. Such a good show.
Oh yeah.
I'm surprised they never like did like a comic series on it.
You're not wrong. I feel like though, I feel like that still wasn't a thing at that time, like because Lost was what 2005, 2005 was season 1 was because
I believe so 4 or 5 kind of,
or 2004. It was 2004. Yes, so it was fall of 2004 because right now we're in the 19th, so next year's gonna be the 20th anniversary of when season 1 dropped, episode 1 dropped. And
time flies.
I feel like mid 2000s, like to do a comic book adaptation was not the thing. It was a game. That's why you got the Lost.
Yeah,
I think like if it came out now, sure, you'd probably get a comic book series. And that would be something that if someone had a passion for it, that knew the world of Lost really well, you could do a really interesting comic book series off of that. I think that's a series that fits that really well. And you could tell some flashbacks, and because Lost kind of changed the game with telling a sequential story, but then doing the flashbacks in between, which you didn't get, I don't think, very often. And then once Lost was a success, then every ABC, NBC, CBS show was doing we'll tell a little bit of the story and then do a flashback. And so, but I'm not surprised it didn't have a comic book, but I feel like it would set up for a really good comic book.
Yeah, I definitely think so, man. That's a show that I wouldn't mind seeing come back just for even just a couple episodes, or do like a TV style 2-hour movie or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going through it right now, and I'm pretty happy with. If you give it to me in comic book form, that's fine. But I feel like, it would be. I don't know if I'd like it.
Yeah, there's still one thing I was kind of salty about, but I won't mention it for spoiler reasons.
Don't mention. Well, she's not going to watch this, but yeah, you mention it whenever we get to that on the episode. When we're doing those, you come back in the comments and you let me know, and we can then talk about it.
All right. Yeah, because this happened in a later season.
Yeah.
So I'll save that for when your video comes out.
Yes, do that.
But man, I guess we should wrap it up.
All right.
Is there anything coming up on your channel that you want to promote?
So my channel has shifted to basically being YouTube shorts, and then I drop an interview every Monday. So I just did an interview with Alex and Matt, who are creators of a book called The Digital Pools, and they're working with a company called Macroverse, which is a digital platform. It's really cool. It's not like an e-reader as much of it feels more cinematic, like with your tapping into it. So that was a fun one. Go check out Macroverse and stuff and what they're doing if you're into digital comics. I've got a bunch of guests coming up. I've got 3 or 4 interviews that are on the docket. And I don't usually tell Russ because I like you. I'll tell, and if it falls through, it falls through. So it's all right. But I've got an interview coming up soon with Brian Buccellato, who did Chicken Devils comic, but he's also writing a new comic for Image about a superhero who's going through a midlife crisis. He's also doing the Justice League versus Godzilla Kong series that comes out in 2 weeks. So he's going to be on the show. Tim Sheridan's going to be on the show talking about Alan Scott Green Lantern coming up. David M. Boer and Drew Zucker are probably going to be out on the show talking about a new book coming up. They're the creators of Kanto, but they're doing a new horror book and things. So these are all ones that I'm in talks with right now. They probably aren't going to, they're all scheduled, so they shouldn't fall through. But I've got a lot that are in the unofficial confirmed dates, so I'm going to hold off on those. But a lot of interviews, a lot of people dealing with the big 2 or Image books right now. So I'm just doing a lot of interviews. I'm probably booked up the next 2-3 months just with interviews. So that's kind of what my channel is involved into, is just doing creator interviews. And now
that's awesome, man. Sounds like a lot of great stuff coming up.
Yeah. So, but and past stuff. I mean, I had we talked about the Superman 78 series. So Robert Venditti was on the show, who did Hawkman, and he did the Superman 78, and Steve Orlando and Steve Fox, who are doing Fall of X series right now. So yeah, a lot of cool creator interviews for sure.
That's awesome, man. I know my channel has pretty much just turned into live streams, which is weird for me because I never would have imagined that years ago. It's because that was just all about short 2-minute videos. But yeah, It's this show and Simply Super
Yep.
every Wednesday. And I've got this show, I think it's booked up until November 6th. So I got a lot of great guests coming up. Next Monday, I'm having Fanboy Prime on. He's another big Superman fan. And yeah, it's just that and the Simply Super show. And every now and again, I might pull out a random review or just a unboxing here and there. But other than that, that's pretty much it for my channel.
Nice.
And real quickly, if anybody like new watches on the replay that happens to not know Bearded, his YouTube channel link is the first one in the description. Definitely go check him out. A lot of great content over there. And like he said, some Lost videos coming up for all these Lost fans out there.
Yeah.
And that'll do it for this one. I'll catch you guys next time. Keep it 9,000.